She wasn't dressed like a billionaire's wife. In fact, if you had seen her waiting at Gate C-17 of the international terminal that afternoon, you might have assumed she was just another tired, quiet woman trying to get home. Her outfit was simple: a soft beige cardigan, worn jeans, and an oversized tote she clutched a little too tightly. No designer labels, no flashy jewelry, no entourage. Her eyes were soft, kind, almost timid. The kind of woman people overlooked, the kind who got ignored in high-end stores, whose voice got drowned out in first-class cabins. Her name was Alina, and the only thing louder than the silence around her was the secret she never cared to share. Her husband owned the airline. She never liked flying private, said it made her feel like a ghost above the world. She liked the sound of babies crying 2 rows down, the smell of half-decent coffee, the weird closeness of strangers. Her husband, Daniel Morgan, CEO of Skyworld Aviation, never understood that, but he respected it. So whenever she traveled alone, she did it quietly. No assistance, no name drops, no one informing the staff that Mrs. Morgan was boarding. The flight to Geneva was long, nearly 10 hours, and she had picked a window seat in first class. She didn't ask for anything special, didn't even want the champagne, just wanted to read her book in peace and maybe sleep through most of the flight. But peace has a funny way of slipping away when people think you're a nobody. The trouble started with a coat. Alina had politely asked the flight attendant, a sharp-faced woman in her mid-30s named Brielle, if she could help her hang it. Brielle didn't respond at first, just glanced at her, then went on organizing the trolley with a kind of mechanical coldness. When Alina asked again with a gentler tone, Brielle rolled her eyes and snatched the coat from her hand without a word. It stung a little, but Alina let it go. She always let things go. But the next few hours were filled with tiny insults, cold responses, ignored service calls, food served last, a suspicious stain on her seat tray that went uncleaned despite her request. She even overheard Brielle chuckling with another flight attendant about some first-class passengers acting like they belong here just because they have a decent credit score. Still, Alina said nothing. She just kept her hands folded in her lap and stared out the window, as though the clouds could make all of it disappear. Then came the slap. She hadn't done anything. Not really. Just asked if it would be possible to have a different blanket. The one she had been given smelled like chemicals. And something about the way she asked, maybe her soft tone, maybe her tired eyes, must have triggered something in Brielle, who turned around so fast it made Alina flinch. "I'm not your maid, lady," she snapped. "You think this is a hotel. You don't like the blanket. Deal with it." Alina opened her mouth to respond, and that's when Brielle, visibly agitated, leaned down and in one swift, shocking move, slapped her across the cheek. The cabin went still. A couple of heads turned. A man in business class gasped. The person next to her, a teenage girl with headphones, froze mid-bite of her meal. Alina's hand moved slowly to her cheek. Her face burned, not just from the slap, but from the humiliation. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't scream, she didn't cry. She just looked at Brielle, eyes wide, not with fear, but something else. Regret. Not hers. Brielle's. Because 5 minutes later, the cabin phone rang, and when Brielle picked it up, she paled. Her voice trembled as she looked back toward Alina, barely able to stand straight. "Ma'am, I didn't know who you were. I'm so sorry. Please, don't let him." But Alina didn't move. She just looked her, dead in the eyes. "My husband's name," she said calmly, "is Daniel Morgan." And with that, she turned her head back to the window, letting the clouds swallow the chaos she no longer needed to explain. Brielle didn't move for a good 10 seconds. The phone in her hand buzzed again, but she was frozen, like her whole nervous system had shut down. When she finally hung up, her fingers were shaking. She walked away without another word, practically sprinting toward the galley, mumbling into her headset, her eyes wide with fear. Alina didn't chase the drama. She just adjusted the blanket that still smelled faintly of detergent and chemical. Cleaner, closed her eyes and leaned back into her seat. Her cheek throbbed faintly, but her silence was heavier than any slap. About 20 minutes later, something changed in the air. Not just in the literal sense, it felt like tension had landed with wheels down. The kind of atmosphere you get when something big is about to happen and no one knows how to stop it. Passengers were whispering. A few people were glancing back toward first class. And then came the captain. Not just a flight attendant, not even the lead one. The captain, full uniform, silver wings, headset still clipped on one ear. He walked down the aisle like he was walking into a courtroom, stern, purposeful, and already pissed. He approached Alina's seat, stopping just to the side, and bent forward with a stiff, respectful nod. "Mrs. Morgan," he said quietly, "may I speak with you privately in the forward lounge?" Alina opened her eyes slowly, and for a moment her calm gaze met his. Not angry, not demanding, just quietly tired. "Only if you're offering me a better blanket," she replied. The captain exhaled through his nose, trying not to let the nerves show. "Of course, ma'am, and much more." The small lounge. Up front was used mostly for the crew or VIPs during longer flights. It was empty now, dimly lit, with a window view and two sleek chairs facing each other. A fresh pot of coffee was waiting on the tray table, and beside it, like it had been conjured from air, was a thick leather folder with a Skyworld Aviation crest embossed in gold. Alina didn't touch it. She sat, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. The captain didn't sit. "I've just been briefed by Mr. Morgan's office," he began, voice stiff but respectful. "They informed me of your identity and instructed me to ensure your comfort for the remainder of the flight." He paused. "They also demanded a full incident report, which I will be filing the moment we land." Alina hummed. "I assume the crew member in question has been spoken to?" "Yes, ma'am. She has been removed from cabin duty and will be confined to quarters for the rest of the flight." Alina tilted her head slightly. "Confinement on a plane, that sounds dramatic." "With respect," he said, "so was the slap." She smiled faintly at that. Then she looked out the window again, the blue of the sky flickering across her face. "Tell me, Captain, if I hadn't said anything, if I hadn't dropped his name, would any of you have believed me, or would I have been just another passenger with a complaint?" The question made him flinch a little. I don't know, ma'am." She turned her head slowly. "That's the most honest thing I've heard all day." There was a silence after that, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. Alina stood, straightened her cardigan, and turned to leave. "Oh," she said softly as she passed him, "tell Brielle I won't be filing a complaint." The captain's eyes widened. "Ma'am?" "No," she repeated. "I won't file anything. Let her sit with what she's done. Let her think about the face she slapped, the voice she ignored, the seat she thought didn't belong." She paused. "Consequences are louder when you don't scream them." And with that she returned to her seat. But Brielle wasn't the only one who'd been watching, because by now the whispers had grown. Screens had lit up. Phones had quietly recorded bits of conversation. A tweet from 14A had already gone viral. A flight attendant just slapped a woman in first class. Turns out her husband owns the damn airline. Y'all. Skyworld. And in a boardroom back in New York, Daniel Morgan had just canceled $1 million investor call because his wife had just been assaulted on one of his planes. And Daniel? He didn't take that lightly. Daniel Morgan was a man who built empires the same way other people built fences, to keep the world out and what mattered most in. He had worked his way up from a broke intern eating instant noodles in a shared apartment to the owner of one of the most powerful airline corporations on the planet. But for all his cold, calculated boardroom moves, there was one person who cracked through his walls without ever trying, Alina. And now someone had laid a hand on her. He found out before the plane even left European airspace. His assistant, nervous as hell, had walked in with a pale face and a phone shaking in her hand. "Sir, there's been an incident on Flight 760 first class." He didn't even ask. "What happened?" Just said, "Alina?" The nod was all he needed. Within minutes, Daniel had 6 executives on speaker, legal on standby, and a private jet being prepped in case he needed to meet her on the tarmac. But even as the reports rolled, in passenger testimonies, a snippet of a phone video, the transcript of the in-flight crew chat, he sat completely still. Except his right hand, tapping against the glass desk in an icy rhythm, Tap, tap, tap. He had always told Alina she didn't need to fly commercial. Hell, she could have had an entire jet fleet named after her. But she liked the normalcy. She liked watching the world breathe. And because she asked for it, he let her be unseen. But someone took that invisibility and twisted it into power. And now? Now someone was about to learn what real power looked like. "Get me HR," he said to no one in particular, legal too, and have PR draft 3 statements, one public, one internal, and one for me personally. His voice was ice, controlled, slow, terrifying in its calm. "Do we know the flight attendant's name?" "Brielle Maddox," his assistant whispered. "Good. Find out where she trained, who hired her, who recommended her. I want a timeline of her entire career here, and a list of every incident report with her name on it. And then—" He paused, letting the silence hang in the air like a noose. "Make sure she never steps foot in the sky again." There was a sharp inhale from one of the executives. "Daniel, if I may, we should probably handle this carefully. If this leaks, it could look like you're using your position for personal revenge." He smiled without warmth. "Good," he said. "Let them think that." The room went silent. Back on the plane, Brielle sat in a cramped crew seat near the rear galley, pale and shaken, staring down at her hands like they were foreign things. Her supervisor hadn't spoken to her since she was pulled from duty. The rest of the crew avoided eye contact. She kept checking her phone, praying there was some explanation, some way out of what was happening. But the texts from her friend in ground ops made her heart sink lower and lower. "Girl, your name's on the no-fly list. They're pulling your employment record from Central. The CEO's office is making calls. He's personally involved." She typed out a message. Something about not knowing, about it being a mistake, about the woman not looking like she belonged. But halfway through she stopped typing, because that was the problem, wasn't it? Alina didn't look like she belonged, and that was all it took to treat her like dirt. When the plane finally touched down in Geneva, Brielle was escorted. Off the aircraft through the side stairwell. Not through the terminal, not with the crew, alone. Alina walked out last, escorted politely by ground staff, a fresh coat folded over her arm. No spotlight, no press, just a quiet strength in her eyes. And waiting for her at the terminal, Daniel, no cameras, no suits, just him, in a black coat, jaw clenched, eyes only for her. Alina didn't run into his arms. She didn't cry. She just reached for his hand like it was the only anchor she ever needed. "I'm okay," she said softly. But Daniel didn't say anything. He just looked over her shoulder, then whispered, "She won't ever hurt anyone again." And Alina, gentle as ever, replied, "That's not just for me, that's for every woman she made feel small." Alina never wanted to be famous. She wasn't made for microphones or spotlights. Her strength had always lived in the background, in quiet rooms, soft hands, silent support. That's what drew Daniel to her in the first place. In a world of noise and ego, she was peace. But peace doesn't last forever. Especially not when a 14-second video of a woman being slapped mid-flight hits 8 million views in one night. It started with the tweet. Then came the reposts. The influencers with massive followings started commenting. Someone pulled up the flight records. Another connected the dots to Daniel Morgan. It didn't take long before hashtags began trending worldwide. Nah, Skyworld slap Alina Morgan. You never know who she married. By morning, Alina's face was on news channels, think pieces, TikToks, podcasts, everywhere. But what made it worse, what made it louder than any corporate scandal, was how she looked in that video. She didn't scream, she didn't fight back. She just sat there with a hand on her cheek, humiliated, stunned, small. And then she said that name. "My husband's name is Daniel Morgan. Boom power, shock, instant legend." Some called her a queen in disguise. Others said it was about classism, about how we treat women who don't look expensive. Think pieces. Spilled onto the internet like a river with no dam, but the attention came with a cost. Paparazzi swarmed outside the hotel in Geneva. Journalists camped at the airport. Daniel's publicist was working on 4 hours of sleep, holding back the tide of calls from news anchors and talk shows, begging for an exclusive. Alina didn't want any of it. "I just want to go home," she whispered, sitting in the hotel. Sweet Daniel had booked for her. The lights dimmed, curtains drawn. She was curled up on the couch, barefoot, drinking tea like the world wasn't screaming her name. Daniel sat across from her, elbows on his knees, watching her closely. He hadn't let her out of his sight since she landed. "You could say something," he said quietly. "Take control of the narrative. You don't have to do interviews, but maybe one post, one message, just to shift the pressure off of you." She looked up at him. "And say what? That I'm okay, that I'm not angry, that it's fine?" He didn't answer, because it wasn't fine. "You know what the hardest part was?" she asked, setting her cup down slowly. "It wasn't the slap, it wasn't the embarrassment. It was realizing. If I had been someone else, someone without your last name, no one would care." Her voice cracked just slightly, and Daniel's jaw clenched hard. She was right. If her name had been Alina Diaz or Thomas or Khan, if she'd gone back to economy class or wasn't wearing a ring worth more than the flight itself, she would have gone viral for one night and been forgotten by Monday. Just another poor woman mistreated in the sky. But now it was war. That same morning, Skyworld Airlines held a global press conference. Their spokesperson, tense and visibly uncomfortable, read from a carefully written statement. "We want to first offer our sincerest apologies to Mrs. Alina Morgan for the unacceptable behavior displayed by one of our employees aboard Flight 760. Effective immediately, the flight attendant has been terminated, and a full review of in-flight training procedures is underway." They even renamed the internal employee conduct policy, the Alina Clause, a zero-tolerance amendment for in-flight abuse. Social media ate it up, but so did the critics. Why did it take a billionaire's wife to get action? What about passengers without power? Is justice only for the wealthy now? Alina read every comment, quietly, carefully. Her heart broke a little more with each one. So, she decided. She called Daniel into the room that evening, sat him down, and said calmly, "I want to start something." He raised an eyebrow. "A statement?" "No," she said. "A foundation. For women who get humiliated, bullied, talked down to, anywhere, airports, customer service, retail, women who get treated like trash just because they don't look rich enough. I want to build something real. I want to fight back. For them." Daniel smiled for the first time in 2 days. "Then that's what we'll do." And just like that, the headlines shifted. Alina Morgan wasn't just the slapped woman anymore. She was about to become something far more powerful. The foundation launched under a name that was simple, but impossible to ignore. Dignity First. Within 72 hours of its announcement, the official website had crashed from too much traffic. Thousands of messages poured in, stories from women all over the world. Hotel clerks, waitresses, retail workers, single moms, students, travelers, women of every color, class, and accent, all sharing the same pain. I was called a slur because I didn't speak English well. I was told I didn't belong in first class. A manager laughed when I cried. No one stood up for me. Alina, read every word. She didn't speak publicly, didn't record any videos, just released a single typed statement. You don't need to be rich to be respected. You don't need diamonds to be treated with dignity. I was lucky. I had someone powerful in my corner. But now, I want you to have someone too. Let this be the last slap anyone stays silent about. And just like that, she went from being protected to being a protector. But not everyone clapped. Back in the US, Brielle Maddox was spiraling. After her immediate termination, she'd lost her apartment, her reputation, and half her friends. The other half only texted her to ask what it felt like to ruin her entire life with one slap. At first, she told herself she was the victim, that Alina had baited her, that it was a setup. She even hired a lawyer to help her sue for wrongful termination. But the footage was damning. The comments online were worse, and the biggest gut punch. No one cared what her side of the story was. Jobless, she took to the internet. She uploaded a shaky video. Poor lighting, blotchy face, nervous eyes. Everyone's calling me a monster. But no one asked what kind of day I was having. I was exhausted. I'd just lost my grandmother. I didn't mean to hit her, it just happened. And I didn't know who she was. I thought she was some They some nobody. That last word, nobody, was her final mistake. The video hit 1 million views in hours, not sympathy, rage. Because if Alina had been anyone else, Brielle would have walked away clean. The backlash was brutal. And Brielle, still clinging to some piece of control, sent a letter to Alina's legal team. A threat of defamation, of emotional distress, of damages. The response she got? Silence. No reply, no statement, nothing. But a week later, Brielle's mailbox was filled with flyers from Dignity First. Her name had been removed from all statements. Not a single public mention since her name had first trended. That should have made her feel safe, but instead, it made her feel invisible. Alina never wanted revenge. She didn't want to ruin Brielle. She wanted to end the system that let Brielle's exist everywhere, smiling in uniforms while quietly punishing people for not looking rich enough, white enough, important enough, and the foundation was growing fast. By the end of the month, Dignity First had opened satellite offices in New York, London, and Johannesburg. Volunteers were getting trained to record and report abuse in service industries. Alina had partnered with multiple airlines, hotels, and retail chains to overhaul how customers were treated. And Daniel? He stood beside her, proudly silent, letting her lead. For once his power didn't have to speak. Hers did. But power comes with enemies, and someone in the industry wasn't thrilled about Alina's rising influence. A secret email thread leaked one morning from a competitor airline. Executives mocking Dignity First, dismissing Alina as a bored billionaire's wife playing activist. A few even joked that maybe Brielle had done the world a favor. The leak blew up. Alina didn't respond directly. Instead, she walked into a press conference in a soft grey suit, no jewelry, no makeup. Just her voice and her presence. "I'm not here for applause," she said, eyes locked on the cameras. "I'm here because if people can lose their dignity on a plane, in a store, in a classroom, then they'll forget how much they're worth, and no woman should ever feel worthless." That sound, not applause, a quiet, long-standing respect. And in that moment, Alina Morgan stopped being just Daniel Morgan's wife. She became something far more dangerous. A woman with a voice the world finally heard. It started with a letter. No return address, no name. Just a plain white envelope slipped under the office door of Dignity First headquarters in New York. The front desk intern thought it was just another donation form or thank you note. Until she opened it. No words inside. Just a printed photo of Alina taken the day she was slapped. And across her face, in bold red marker, "Know your place." Security swept the building within an hour. Daniel flew in that night without warning, arriving at the office like a thundercloud in a tailored coat. His eyes didn't blink. His voice stayed low, cold, calculating. "I want security doubled," he told the operations team. "Alina doesn't walk to her car alone, ever." Alina, of course, resisted. "I'm not going to live like I'm hunted," she said. Daniel didn't argue. He just looked her dead in the eyes and said, "This isn't about fear, it's about being prepared." Because Daniel knew what she was becoming, something bigger than herself. And people in power hated when someone they couldn't control started shifting the ground beneath them. Within 48 hours, 2 more threats arrived. 1 email, 1 phone call to the London office. "You're next. She deserves another slap. Or worse, shut it down or we will." No one claimed responsibility, but it didn't take long for digital investigators to trace the IP of the email. It came from a private server tied to a lobbying firm, one that represented 3 major competitors of Skyworld Airlines. The message was clear. Alina had disrupted the balance, and the ones profiting off mistreatment weren't going to let her burn their game to the ground without a fight. Daniel's legal team went on the offensive, but Alina, she doubled down. She booked herself on another commercial flight, this time coach class, without telling anyone, not even Daniel, until she was already mid-air. He found out from Twitter. A passenger posted a picture. Alina squeezed between 2 strangers, smiling warmly, reading a book titled The Cost of Silence. The caption read, "The woman who started a global movement is sitting in economy with us. No security, no drama, just grace. I'm in awe. Alina Morgan. By the time Daniel's team tracked her down, the flight had landed. She was already shaking. Hands with ground staff, smiling, thanking people. He was livid. You could have been hurt, he snapped that night in the hotel, pacing the room while she calmly peeled off her shoes. I know, she said, not looking up, but I needed to remind people what this is really about. That it's not just me, it's every woman who can't afford first class but still deserves to be treated like a human being. He sat down, heavily, frustration battling with admiration in his eyes. I just don't want to lose you. You won't, she whispered. But danger was circling. And it wasn't just letters and threats now. One night someone tried to break into the Dignity First office in Johannesburg. They tripped an alarm and fled, but it was no random theft attempt. They only smashed one room, the server room. The heart of the Foundation's digital infrastructure. Files, donor lists, victim testimonies, internal research. Luckily, it was all backed up, but the message, crystal clear. They were being watched, hunted. And as Daniel tightened the net around her with more guards, more precautions, more legal firepower, Alina quietly planned her next move, something that couldn't be burned, hacked, or silenced. A live event. One where thousands of women would stand beside her. Not just a speech, a global broadcast. The world would see their faces this time. And even if someone wanted her silenced, they'd have to silence all of them. They called it the Voice March. What started as an idea in Alina's journal turned into a movement that swept across continents. Thousands of women from over 60 countries flew in for it. Hotels were overbooked. Public transport systems stretched thin. City officials had to shut down 6 blocks around the venue to make room. But no one complained, because something bigger than traffic or inconvenience was happening here. It wasn't just a rally, it was a reckoning. The main stage was built in the heart of Central Park. Sleek, minimal, surrounded by giant screens showing clips of testimonies submitted to Dignity First from all over the globe. Videos of women speaking into webcams, crying in break rooms, whispering in bathrooms, each one telling their story, telling the world they weren't invisible anymore. Alina stood backstage in a long black coat, eyes scanning the sea of people before her. She could hear the chants echoing through the trees. Dignity for all. We see you. Alina, Alina. But she wasn't smiling. She was focused. Daniel stood beside her, his hand gently pressed against her lower back. His face was unreadable, half pride, half terror. Every step she took now was watched by more than just cameras. There were men in suits surrounding the perimeter, security teams Daniel hired personally, snipers on rooftops, crowd surveillance software running through every face that passed the gates. Nothing was left to chance. But chaos doesn't always need a gun. Sometimes it just needs a moment. As Alina stepped onto the stage, the crowd exploded into cheers. Thousands of women with signs, fathers holding daughters on their shoulders, survivors locking arms with strangers. And somewhere in the third row, behind mirrored sunglasses and a press badge, someone was reaching into their coat. Alina walked up to the mic, hands steady. She looked across the crowd, her heart pounding, not from fear, but purpose. She began to speak. I never wanted to be up here, she said. I was always the quiet one, the background one, the woman who smiled and moved aside and said sorry even when it wasn't her fault. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. But when someone laid their hand across my face, I didn't just feel the sting on my skin. I felt the sting of every time I'd ever been dismissed, disrespected, made small. And I knew in that moment, this wasn't just my story. Somewhere in the crowd, the hand in the coat moved again. Security caught it on a thermal feed. An alert went up. Daniel's phone buzzed. His eyes locked in on the screen. Potential? Threat detected. Row 3. Section D. Alina kept going. This is for the women who were told their pain wasn't important, who were told to sit down, shut up, look pretty, who were told, you don't belong here. The hand emerged, but it wasn't holding a weapon. It was holding a water balloon, one filled with red dye, thrown fast, messy, targeted. It hit Alina square across the shoulder, splashing across her coat and down her chest like blood. The crowd gasped. Panic stirred. Security surged. The man was tackled in seconds, face pressed. To the ground, arms zip-tied behind his back. Reporters swarmed, phones filmed from every angle. But Alina, she didn't flinch. She didn't even step back. She just stood there, dripping red, lips set, eyes hard, and slowly, she reached up, peeled the coat off and let it fall to the stage floor. Underneath she wore a white blouse, stained now, but unbroken. She stepped back up to the mic and, with the world watching, she said, "Let this be the last time anyone tries to paint a woman's voice as a threat." The crowd erupted. It wasn't just applause, it was a roar, like the earth itself was rising to meet her. And just like that, they didn't just see a woman who had been slapped. They saw a woman who couldn't be silenced, not with die, not with threats, not even with fear. The morning after the attack, headlines flooded every media outlet across the globe. Alina Morgan struck again, but stands taller than ever. Red dye, white shirt, and a woman who refused to step back. Voice March turns historic. As Alina declares, "We will not be erased." But back inside the private suite Daniel had secured at the Manhattan Regent, Alina wasn't celebrating. She sat quietly by the window, robe loosely tied, hair unbrushed, a simple bowl of oats in her lap growing cold. She wasn't thinking about her stained blouse or the crowd's roar. Her mind was on something else. Silence. The kind that came. After the roar faded, Daniel came in mid-call, whispering something urgent to one of the Foundation's legal heads before hanging up and walking over. "They caught him," he said. "The guy who threw the die, freelance security contractor. Hired anonymously, but our digital team's tracing it back. It wasn't just a stunt." She nodded once. "I know. They wanted you to crack. I know." He crouched in front of her, searching her face. "But you didn't." She looked down at her hands. "I don't want this to become a fight about me." "It already is," he said gently. "You've become the face of something, even if you didn't ask for it." That's when she said it. "I'm stepping down." Daniel blinked. "What?" "I'm removing myself as the head of Dignity First." He stood, up too fast, shocked. "Why?" "After everything you've built, after what they tried to do to you, why now?" "Because it's not about me," she said softly. "It never was. If this movement stays tied to my name, people will keep trying to kill it by attacking me. But if I let it go, if I pass it on to the women who lived through worse than I ever did, it becomes unstoppable." She stood, finally meeting his eyes. "I'll still fund it. I'll still guide it. But I don't need the stage anymore. The stage needs them." He stared at her, silent for a long time, and then finally he smiled. Not the CEO smile, not the public smile, the real one. "I married the most dangerous woman in the world," he whispered. She leaned forward and kissed him on the cheek. "No," she said. "You married the quiet one." But the world wouldn't stop making noise. 2 weeks later, Alina Morgan officially resigned as the face of Dignity First. She handed the reins to 3 women from different countries, each of them survivors. Each of them once ignored, now amplified. She turned her silence into structure, her pain into purpose, and then she disappeared from public view. No more speeches, no interviews, no new videos. Some people said she'd gone back to living in peace. Others said she was quietly building something even bigger. A few speculated she'd write a book, or maybe run for office. But the truth? She was just living. One morning, 2 years later, a young woman boarded a Sky World flight from Mumbai to Paris. She wore second-hand clothes, carried a stitched-up backpack, and looked terrified as she walked into first class. When a male flight attendant offered to help her with her bag, she hesitated. I don't think I'm in the right section," she whispered. "They might have made a mistake. I didn't pay for this seat." The attendant smiled warmly. "No mistake. You were upgraded by the system. Random kindness initiative." She blinked. "What's that?" He pointed to a small bronze plaque near the cabin wall. "This seat belongs to no one. It is reserved for the woman who thought she didn't belong, until someone reminded her she did. The Alina policy. The girl sat down slowly, and for the first time in her life she felt something she hadn't in years, seen.